Welcome, everyone, to another session of interviews from Israel. Today, we're very honored to have with us Dr. Medzini and his son Mickey, and we're looking forward to hearing from both of them. I thought possibly, Dr. Medzini, you could begin by maybe updating everybody on what day this is of the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. Maybe tell us how many hostages remain in captivity. And I was also concerned that people be aware of the death toll on the side of the IDF soldiers. So if you could start there and then take it away. I know you've got a lot to talk about
Yeah,
this morning.
I prepared about 5 or 6 items.
Great.
Let's start off where we are today. This is day 117 of this war, which makes it probably the second lengthy war that we have fought since 1948. The numbers as they stand today, the casualties, military casualties, from the time we went into Gaza now stand at close to 200. Yesterday, 3 more, and just an hour ago, they announced the death of another one, a major, a reserve officer who leaves behind 5 orphans.
Wow.
The number of orphans is approaching 500. And the total numbers now, including those who were massacred on the 7th of October, it is now approaching 1,500, probably even higher. Number of hostages, formerly 136. The assumption is that of the 136, at least 24, if not more, are no longer alive. And therefore, we're looking at about 108. And among them are, of course, babies, starting with a baby who is 1 year old, a year and a week, Kfir Bibas. And the oldest is, I think, 86 or 87. And these include children, women, young women, elderly women, men, some soldiers, the majority civilians. And I'll have something to say about the hostages in a minute.
Great.
There has been virtually no change in the number of those who were displaced, either from the southern border along the Gaza line or from the northern border with Lebanon. It stands at around 180, 185,000, which is something we have never experienced in the past. It is true that these people have shelter, either in hotels or motels or guest houses or with families. Some of them even found apartments in various urban centers. But this is far from a normal situation. It is disastrous, for example, for children who cannot go to school properly or kindergarten or have various after-school activities. The trouble is that no one has a clue when to expect the beginning of the return of some people. Several have gone back, that is true. Especially farmers in the north who have to feed their chicken, who have to sow, who have to reap, who have to look after their plantations. But they're doing this at an enormous, there's enormous danger to their lives. And therefore, we have no idea yet when the displaced will begin to go home in large numbers. Now, this is a huge number. Bear in mind that we had at the maximum 360,000 soldiers, but 2/3 reserve soldiers, and the rest were the regular army. In other words, if you look at, you take the displaced, you take those in uniform, you reach well over 500,000 people. And that's a huge number. That is 5% of the total population of Israel. And this is something that is beginning to concern us. It is true that the IDF has released quite a few reserve soldiers, but it is very difficult for them to come home and to adjust themselves to normal life after serving most of them since October 7th. And as a result, we see now a growing number of people who need psychological help. Many of them children who have been traumatized for various reasons. We don't have enough staff to deal with this problem, and this is beginning to weigh very heavily on us. Number of wounded soldiers who are still either in hospital or in rehabilitation centers hovers around 4,500. In other words, this war has been extremely costly for Israel, first and foremost in terms of human lives lost, hostages, and the huge number of wounded. I'm not talking yet about the expenses. It is estimated every day of the war is costing the Israeli economy about $1 billion. We had hoped to get what was discussed with the United States, $14 billion, but that is linked to U.S. aid to Ukraine. And as you know, it's being held up in the Senate by mostly Republican senators. I don't really understand why. And therefore, this money is not there. And as a result, the government had to slash regular budgets, which means less welfare and less education and less health services. Gas prices going up tomorrow. Prices of basic foods have gone up about 10%. In other words, every Israeli is beginning to feel the pinch in one way or another. Where do we stand in terms of the war? Israel has now taken over around 60% of the Gaza Strip. But there are still nests of terrorists hiding predominantly in tunnels and various piers and underground facilities, which they built in the past 16 years. And on occasion, they emerge from these tunnels and fire either RPGs or throw hand grenades or even shoot with automatic weapons. Yesterday, we had a soldier killed in northern Gaza, which we thought was secure. It is not yet fully secure. There is heavy fighting in the central part, and that is Khan Yunis, where we discovered huge piles of equipment, rockets, plants for producing rockets. We found dumps of ammunition. And curiously enough, yesterday, after about 5 weeks of relative quiet on the southern border, they launched 11 missiles. And there was a siren in Tel Aviv and in the central part of Israel, in the heartland of Israel. In other words, they still have the capacity. No one knows really how many they have. We assume that we have decapitated most of their capability to produce additional rockets and other types of weapons, but we're not fully sure. how there is a big discussion now. Do we go into the border town with Egypt? It's called Rafah. The key problem there is what would be the reaction of the Egyptians. The Egyptians are not too happy, but the fear of the Egyptians is that using the cover of war, many Palestinians will try to get across into Sinai. And this is the last thing Egypt wants, is to see Palestinians moving from the Gaza Strip to Sinai. Our guess is that if they will have the freedom to go across the border, you will have hundreds of thousands of Palestinians trying to get to Egypt and from there elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not yet sure how long we need and how long this will take. What we do need to wage such a long war, you need basically two things. You need alliances and you need time. Alliances we still have. Time, I'm not sure how long we will have. There are three other points I want to make, and I'll do it briefly. One is last Friday, the International Court of Justice handed down a provisional decision. They accepted the right of South Africa to represent the Palestinians who charge Israel with genocide. The irony is that the law banning genocide, adopted, I think, initially in 48, but went into operation in 53, came as a result of the Holocaust. And Israel was one of the initiators, and Israel was among the first countries to sign the convention against genocide. They accepted the principle that they will hear the case. This could take, of course, years. The court is made up of 15 judges who are appointed by their governments. And therefore, we cannot expect, for example, that the Lebanese judge will be friendly, or the judge from Cuba, or from other places. Curiously enough, one of the only friendly judges we have is the one from Uganda, out of all places. What they did do is, one positive thing is they called upon Hamas to release immediately all the hostages with no conditions.
Mm-hmm.
But they did not call on Israel to cease military operations. They did not call for an immediate ceasefire. But they insisted that Israel allow humanitarian aid, allow the functioning of various international aid organizations, that Israel will report every month on what it has done in the last month, something that some of us consider insulting. We have to report to them what we're doing, being the victims of a major attack on us. There are those in Israel who say this is far better than we feared. There are others who say this is, we can live with it, but no more than that. And therefore it hovers over our heads. At some point, they will have to make a ruling. We have no idea how they will formulate it. But we do have to be quite careful about all this.
Mm-hmm.
Another issue connected is the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, UNRWA, which has been looking after Palestinian refugees since 1949. It was created immediately after the first Israel-Arab War. Initially, it dealt with about 730,000 Palestinian refugees who were scattered at the time in Gaza, West Bank, East Bank of Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon.
Mm-hmm.
The Arabs insisted that this organization be a totally separate entity and will exist on its own, will not be under the aegis of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees.
Right.
And they keep renewing the mandate of this UNRWA every year. And it exists because of contribution donations by the major powers. UNRWA has been providing services, health, welfare, food, and above all, education. And we had serious problems with the education because the textbooks that they use in Arabic
Mm-hmm.
essentially call for the elimination of Israel. And all our efforts to deal with this, to bring about a revision in the textbooks, failed miserably. And finally, it turned out that 12 of the staff of this agency, UNRWA, were involved in the attack on the 7th of October. And this
Right.
apparently was too much for quite a few powers, who announced at the end of last week, beginning of this week, that they are suspending their contributions to this organization. Among them, states, Canada, Britain, Japan, for example, Finland, and a few other countries. I think by now it's about 18 countries. The
Right.
one who is very upset and very vociferous, and as things stand, turned out to be quite hostile to Israel, is the UN Secretary General, Guterres,
Mm-hmm.
who's a Portuguese, who immediately after the massacre of October 7th issued a statement saying this has to be seen in context.
Right.
Well, you in America are now familiar with the term context. You've seen it in the hearings of the presidents of UPenn, Harvard, I think Cornell or somebody else. And at the moment, UNRWA promised to mend its ways. We found huge piles of weapons in UNRWA institutions, such as schools, hospitals, kindergartens, welfare centers. And recently we've seen that food, humanitarian aid, so-called, that came into the Gaza Strip through either Egypt or through Kerem Shalom, which is the Israeli point of entry. The food was distributed by Hamas, not by UNRWA. Unarmed Hamas, which basically teaches us a lesson that Hamas is still around and it's very active.
Right.
The last point I want to make at this stage is the negotiations for hostage return.
Right.
The talks were held in Paris. Today is on Sunday. Participants were the head of the CIA, Barnes, who was a very decent man. I met him a number of times. Representatives, the head of the Mossad in Israel, other security service, and an officer in charge of hostage return. The Prime Minister of Qatar. Prime Minister of Qatar is now in the States. Yesterday he spoke at the Atlantic Council. And they went over certain principles. The principles are how long will there be need for a pause, which means ceasefire or truce? How long, if so? The second is the demand of Hamas that the war would be totally terminated. Another demand of Hamas is that the Israeli army withdraw from the entire Gaza Strip. Another one of their demands are international guarantees that this indeed will be the case. Another one of their demands is the ratio should be 1 to 100. We are holding in various types of prisoners, some of them in jail, some of them in administrative detention. I think about 8,000 people. Effectively, what they want is the release of virtually all of them from Israeli
Right.
prisons, many of them with a lot of blood on their hands.
Mm-hmm.
The last time we had such a prisoner exchange, it was for one soldier, 1,027 Palestinians, including Yahya Sinwar, the
Right.
commander of Hamas. To this, of course, Israel can't accept these terms. Today, there are discussions in Cairo between the leaders of Hamas, especially those who live in Qatar, Hania and Mashal, the Egyptian the head of military intelligence. I don't know if there are Americans there or not, and they are supposed to produce a reply. There are all sorts of rumors flying around here, none of them confirmed, and therefore we cannot go wrong. We have no idea yet if and when and under what conditions. There is enormous pressure on the government of Israel by the families of the hostages who
Mm-hmm.
insist, whatever the case, we want our loved one at home because we have no idea who is alive and who is not alive, and many of them are in a pretty frail condition. So, as we speak now, the war is on, we're losing people. We have made many, many significant achievements, there's no doubt about it. Our alliance with America is holding. We're being supported also by Britain, by Germany, by even statements from Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs and other countries. But there are a growing number of countries that are increasingly hostile. For example, China, which for
Mm-hmm.
some unknown reason has become quite vociferous against Israel, not to mention Russia. The main fear in America is America says to us, look, we want to limit this war. We want to put to an end because there is fear about the northern border, which we have
Right.
not yet discussed. And there is a problem with Syria. And there's a beginning of restlessness in the West Bank. And as you know, the Americans have now been involved in maintaining freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. So we engage on 5 fronts. The
Mm-hmm.
Americans on one, but America at this stage of the game, and for obvious reasons, election year, does not want to expand this war, which could have very, very serious consequences. Chief culprit, of course, was and remains Iran, that
Right.
is arming the Hezbollah and all the others. I think I'll stop here and let you ask more questions of me or of Mickey.
Okay. Well, one of the things that of course, am very concerned about is the fact that there is specific things that we're all looking to see happen, including the release of the hostages, but also the taking down or removal of Hamas from power. And as I understand it, there's still about 80% of the tunnels that are intact at this point. And so, if there is a kind of a forcing upon Israel to ceasefire in order to procure some arrangement about the hostages, then where does that really leave us as far as the removal of Hamas?
It does not. On the contrary, it
Mm-hmm.
will provide Hamas with additional commanders and soldiers who will come from Israeli prisons.
Right.
And this is something that defies the imagination. A ceasefire or a pause or a truce, whatever you want to call it, means that you can't destroy the tunnels.
Mm-hmm.
The destruction of, first of all, we underestimated completely the length of the tunnels. In some cases, the size, the width, the height of the tunnels. We also are very, very careful to, when we do go into the tunnels, if lest we hurt Israeli hostages, who
Mm-hmm.
were those, at least those who returned last time, were in the tunnels. We tried, for example, a few days ago to flush some of the tunnels with water from the ocean, from the Mediterranean. It's too complicated. And it's obvious that we will have to deal with the tunnels because if we do not deal with the tunnels, we have not totally achieved our goals. And the
Mm-hmm.
goals are they remain bring the hostages back and destroy the capability of Hamas from military point of view and from a governance point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all linked together, Gary. This is the tragedy. I mean,
Right.
there's no precedent. I don't recall any war in the world that was fought in the air, at sea, on the ground, and underground
Mm-hmm.
to such an extent. The Germans built
Right.
certain tunnels, but insignificant compared to what the Hamas has done. And now we realize something else. Where the money that they received, not only from Qatar, but from other sources as well, where did this money go? It went predominantly into building the tunnels. It also went partially into building some very nice villas and summer homes for the heads of Hamas, including some fancy swimming pools, and modern furniture, and so on. These we captured in Khan Yunis, predominantly in Khan Yunis. One of them, I think, belonging to the brother of Sinwar. But the population remains basically supportive of Hamas, irrespective of
Mm-hmm.
the fact that
Right.
most of them have been displaced.
So with the Israeli people, because it almost seems like you're confronted with a trade-off between continuing against Hamas or emphasizing the hostage return. They almost become mutually exclusive at some point. And do you feel like the overwhelming sense or desire of Israelis is to see the return of hostages in lieu of finishing the reign of Hamas, or vice versa?
No, vice versa. The last poll taken yesterday, 50% of the Israelis say carry on with the military operation, irrespective, because they realize if we stop now, we haven't achieved anything,
Mm-hmm.
and we've paid a huge price for what has been done so far, and that pretty soon, a year, 2 or 3 years, we'll have the same problem again. Perhaps even in a more serious manner. No, the majority of Israelis say carry on, whatever the cost, whatever the price. We have to deal with this in the most harsh manner we can.
Okay. Well, that's very important for, I think, our audience to understand, because there's not a real clarity in the way that the news comes through of what direction the country is really leaning. And so it's really important to get a feeling for that. Mickey, do you want to give us an update on you and your family, your daughter, and things that are happening where you're concerned?
So me, I myself still in service around here, not far from, literally few hundred yards from the West Bank. We do feel the tension in the West Bank. We do get the intelligence of the volcano that is not erupted yet, but might be. So we are we're keeping forces here. We still on keeping the alerts. My daughter is like many other reservists who were in Gaza. Um, Left the area. She's still in service. She's in her home base, regrouping and preparing everything for either going back to Gaza again, maybe Northern Front in the future. We don't know. So she's still there. Like many other Israelis in reserve, uh, trying to figure out what's next for them in the coming weeks. So many reservists who discharged, age 23, 4 to usually 40, most of them, either young families or students, trying to figure out, okay, when will be my next service? What can I do in between? Some trying, trying, challenging to go back to work after 3 months of fighting day and night. It's hard to go back into a routine. So some challenges there. Some challenges with the employees. How do we get you back when you go back again? How do we manage those? So there are many challenges on that front. I think we'll overcome them, but it will take time, and we'll have to readjust many people life to a new routine, which will include more reserve service. Even after the war ends, we assume that the army will issue more calls for training and for patrolling and for making sure everything is secure. So
Hmm.
this is
Can I
where.
add two more things?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
First of all, on the family note, I've got two grandchildren in the army. Both of them out of harm's way. One of them is now doing a naval officer's course. The other is in a infantry unit, the same one I served in 72 years ago. And on the 15th of February, the entire family will gather at the Western Wall, where he will be sworn in.
Wow.
Which reminds me that my son Mickey was sworn in at the Western Wall. What is it, 57 years ago?
Next,
37 years ago,
yeah,
or
37.
38 years ago. Same place. Probably will receive his Bible. And this is a very moving event for Israeli families, especially since it is at the wall. The second point I want to make is most Israelis, all the polls indicate, are determined that we are not going to go back to where we were on October 6th,
Good.
and that we do need quite a few changes. I won't say reforms, but changes in our political life, probably in our leadership, in the manner in which the government functions. Unlike the Yom Kippur War, this government has not handled the situation in the most brilliant manner, on the contrary. We will have to rethink quite a few things that were prevalent until October 7th. That's the watershed of
Hmm.
Israel, and this applies to virtually every segment of the Israeli population. I was asked the other day We had a Zoom conference with a congregation in Vermont. Am I still optimistic? The answer is absolutely. Partly because we keep quoting Golda Meir, who said, "There's nowhere else to go. You've got to be optimistic." Or Ben Gurion, who said that pessimism is not a luxury that we can afford. But I think
Yeah.
there are good grounds to remain optimistic. Somehow we will handle this, we will manage this. And then, believe it or not, we will have to start worrying increasingly about growing anti-Semitism. Many, many countries, situation on the campus. Why are so many young people in various countries so hostile to Israel?
Yeah.
Why can't they come to terms with the idea that Jews, like every other people, deserve a state of their own? It's the only country in the world whose existence is challenged. Maybe there's another one, that's Taiwan, but that's a different story. And Iran, there's hardly a day in which they don't call for our elimination once, twice, three times a day. But by and large, we have managed to sustain this war so far. And but there are still quite a few trials and tribulations ahead of us.
Yes. Well, I have two questions. I know we've gone long here, but it's just so important. One is when you're talking about the government in Israel and changes coming to the government, do you feel like the ones who should take over are there and close to being in place and ready to fill in to the positions that should be replaced?
The answer is yes, absolutely. Let's say if Netanyahu will go, there are a number of people in the cabinet. Two of them former chiefs of staff, Gantz and Eisenkot, who are very capable of stepping in. You see, chief of staff in the Israeli army is not only the top military commander, he's also very, very good at diplomacy. Both of them have very strong connections in America, which is extremely important. They're well known in Europe as well, and there is a great deal of respect for them in among the Israeli population. So leaders who are likely to step in, they're there, and they have experience, and they're ready to take over if the need arises. And the need will arise. There's no question that we can't go back to where we were before.
Right. Good. The last question I have for you is, I know that we experienced a strike against the U.S. military enclave there in Jordan, and everyone is waiting for some type of a response from the U.S. And my question to you is, do you feel like it would be the right time and the right thing to do to actually strike directly at Iran?
Iran, no, not at this stage of the game. It's too risky. But to strike at targets, let's say in Iraq, or even in Syria, that are supported by Iran, the answer is yes. I believe this is one of the options that the White House is considering. That is a limited response, but a major operation against Iran that could likely cause World War III. And on the other hand, if you wait too long, Iran will be nuclear.
Yeah.
But I belong to the school of thought that says even if Iran will be nuclear, this could trigger a situation of a Middle East regional balance of nuclear terror, similar to what you had after the Second World War.
Right.
Global balance of terror. And this may eventually lead to some sort of coexistence, not more than that. To remind you that after the Yom Kippur War, Sadat decided to enter into a peace process with Israel that culminated in a peace treaty. And he was asked a number of times by Egyptians, what you doing? Why are you doing this? And his answer was, we tried, we lost the war. Israel is reported to have nuclear powers. This is madness. I'd rather start a peace process, which he did. True, it was government to government, not so much people to people. But it's better than no peace at all. And I have a strong feeling that this eventually we're moving slowly into that sort of a situation.
Good. Well, as always, we love your optimism and very much respect your thoughts and opinions on all of these things. Thank you so much for being with us, and we will continue looking to you for information and guidance for our audience. So thank you, Mickey. Thank you, Dr. Medzini. Very much appreciate the time with you.
Yeah, we're always here, and we appreciate everything you've done, Pastor Gary and all your friends. Just be in touch with us.
We will.
Not only pray for us, but write letters, talk to your representatives, tell them that the Israelis are quite determined to hang on, to soldier through this war.
Thank you. Okay, I will talk to you soon.
Bye.